Well, hello there. Live from the Intercontinental Toronto Centre Hotel, I'm Susan Radojevic, and this is Corner Office. A quick sidebar from the start. You may notice that my voice is slightly off. That's because I'm trying to suppress a pesky cough. So you will see me stop to sip some water. I do apologize for that and just ask for your understanding. This is one of those unknown unknowns, and the show must go on. So, we recently launched our Complexity series with special guest David Snowden, a pioneer in complex adaptive systems theory. Towards the end of the show, I asked David, Deborah Pickfield, and Jean Le Tourneau to give us a tip that would help us start capitalizing on complexity. A few of you liked our suggestions, and you told us about them, sorry. A few of you went a step further. You shared your ideas on how we can make Corner Office a richer experience, and for that, we thank you very much. We used some of your suggestions to bring you this month's Complexity Series installment, How to Provoke Creative Leadership. And joining me to elevate the conversation is our very own Corner Office Explorer, Deborah Pickfield, Principal of ThinkSpot Burlington. Deborah's work is in collaboration, and Deborah says effective collaboration is messy. Jean Le Tourneau is CEO of SBVCG Inc. and a Corner Office Explorer. Jean's passion is engaging with clients and all stakeholders to drive sustainable, long-term value creation for all. And our special guest is Shirley Knight, Principal of Shirley M. Knight and Associates. Shirley helps leaders plan, structure, and create a culture for growth. Welcome, and nice to have you all in Corner Office.
Yeah.
Nice to be here, thank you.
Yeah, nice to be here.
Great. Before we get started, a few rules of engagement. After all, Corner Office is an intersection where conversations take place before, during, and after the show. And today, we are streaming live from the Intercontinental Toronto Centre Hotel, a Corner Office first. So, if you are watching us online and have a question, please use the chat tab found on your screen. If you are following us on our Twitter hashtag #COLive, post your question using the hashtag. Maria, our community manager, is monitoring our channels and will make sure we get your questions. And if you are near the Intercontinental Toronto Centre Hotel, drop in and join our live audience and ask your question in person. Okay, with our engagement channels open, let's get started. In the IBM Complexity Survey, over 1,500 CEOs cited creativity is what's going to help them deal more effectively with complexity. Creativity in this context is about creative leadership, a leadership style that's less about command and control and more about coaching and empowering. Research also shows that creative leadership is a learned behavior. What do creative leaders do differently? Who wants to start?
Well, I'm not going to, because you said I would be the one to go. So I'm
Deborah's a
purposely just
keener.
going to sit back.
Deborah's a, Shirley, why don't you just get our special guest?
Okay, all righty.
Well,
It's a good question because creativity is a culture, and leaders create culture and drive culture. So it is like, what do the leaders do is a really good question to ask. Leaders create the conditions for creativity, and they empower people. That is what they do. It is very messy to do that. You make that point very well. And this is where the distinction between a manager and a leader comes into play, because creating the conditions for creativity doesn't necessarily imply any control. The good news is that people are all creative. We are all creative, and therefore all companies are creative. So it's there. It's tapping into it. And with the right conditions, you'll have it. How and when and where it actually delivers, you can't control that. And that's where a management mentality gets a little scary with this. But a leader, a creative leader has vision for the future of the organization. Excuse me, and they can talk about that in very tangible terms that people understand where they're going, and they also have a passion for getting that done and making that happen. So they, in the context of that, they're very comfortable equally with success or failure. They are really comfortable on uncharted ground. It doesn't matter if they've never been there before. And but the key to all of this is it's creativity with a purpose. What you're trying to drive in creativity is to better the organization in the long term. So it makes you more relevant, more valuable to your customers, and it makes you perform better, increase your performance. That's the creativity. That's the scope that you're trying to create. The leaders themselves, it's like when you're on an airplane, like put the oxygen mask on you first before you start helping anybody else. So leaders know themselves, and good creative leaders know themselves really well. They know how they react to change. They know how they react to failure. They know exactly how they are. And the other thing is they're really confident, and we should all be confident, because even if we're doing something we've never done before, we may not have the competency for that, but we have the capability. And creative leaders are confident in their capability.
I'm just going to interject here, because you said about leaders need to let go of control.
Yes.
And some leaders, that's a hard challenge for them to grasp, because I think what they have to understand is that they can still be in charge, but they don't necessarily have control. And Jean, what do you think about that as a CEO?
It's a good question. I'm not sure that if there's a, you could be a creative leader and you can still have control, because to be creative, is it a leadership issue at the top? And if you have a creative leadership at the top, does it mean that everyone in the organization have to be creative as well? Or if you have a very creative leadership with a good execution, you need some controls in place, because you have a vision that you want to execute, and for execution you need some parameters. People need to know exactly what they do, what they have to do, and how they are expected to perform. And if that is clear, there's some, I'm not calling it control, because I don't like controls, but I like to define parameters, within which you can, here's where you can go, and here's where you cannot go. So people have to know where they can go and where they cannot go. So the control is not defined by you must do 1, 2, and 3, and 4, but here's where you can and where you can't go.
So you want people to feel encouraged so that they could actually look for something different on how they could do something. I mean, even though they've got strict guidelines and parameters on how to do it, there's also ways of how could we at some point do something better, but it doesn't mean you go do it, make the change. But back to the comment about creativity as leaders, I mean, on the last show we talked about, and I actually feel like I repeat myself a lot, is that we can live with this uncertainty and that complexity. And I think a creative leader actually embraces that, because otherwise, and we talked about this, otherwise you're doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, and that's useless, right? Because you're not going to be creative. The other thing I think about creative leaders is they actually understand that it's not about them. And so all their work, funny, and it's really about empowering, as you talked a few minutes ago, empowering everybody to find their own inner creativity and actually working together on that. And so the other thing I think is that they listen very well, and that's something that we really need as individuals to embrace that more. And that was my last suggestion last time, was how do you listen without even responding to something that somebody says.
So where does trust? Because we're saying that a leader is going to relinquish control. They're still in charge, but they have to relinquish control. So where does trust? How does trust fit in there? Because in order for you to relinquish control, you got to trust people. And how the research that I read, there's not a lot of leaders that are really willing to trust that much by relinquishing that much control in order to empower.
I think there's some things that when we talk about relinquishing control, I think this might be appropriate to define the term. There are things that a creative leader would control, and I'm thinking right now about cultural underpinnings of creativity. They would control that. So for example, bonuses and promotions work really well if you want people to do the same thing all over again and run down. They focus people and they narrow people and they do it better faster. In a creative environment, they actually inhibit creativity, that kind of a bonus structure or extrinsic. It's intrinsic motivation that works for people. Personal mastery, the ability to get better at things, a higher purpose, things that I am serving a higher purpose, and that energizes me. Autonomy, you can let me do my work at my time because you trust and you know I am creative and I will, and you have told me the vision and the purpose, and I will work with that. And so that's where the leader actually does control how the motivators are in place, and that's really what determines the culture too, what people get rewarded for and recognized for. And a leader can do that quite well.
And I think for building trust, in your team, you need to know your team.
Yeah.
And it takes a deep knowledge of your trust, of your team, and alignment of the people and what you think. And if you don't have the right people, not sure that you can work with these people, because trust will never come. Trust has to be around values that people will share, and trust has to be, if you're a CEO and you want to relinquish control, you have to trust that the job will get done. So there's a need for a very strong alignment, and the trust comes from what people do and how they interact together and how they really work to get the job done together.
And I was wondering too, when you talk about trust, I mean, perhaps when executives are feeling, well, how much of the shareholder is going to appreciate the fact that, let go of relinquish control to me as far as, I fail. I don't like that word failure, but yeah, that's the expectation, right? That they're going to keep meeting increased profitability. So they're feeling, well, I got to keep tight reins on this, wherein the trust only happens when you actually let people just, with guidelines, say, I'm taking a chance here and let it go. And that's when you start to build up the trust, when you're consistent. So that's hard sometimes for people.
And so it's more about asking for people to, asking the leaders to trust the people, and the people understanding what the parameters are and where they have control and where the leader has control. Is that what we're saying?
Well, the leader's creating the conditions, and that is all of the parameters. So they're creating the conditions for people to be free, to contribute, free to create, to be empowered to create. So creating those conditions is a lot of really important work. The how that it actually happens, you don't have to be involved. That's where the coaching comes in. The coaching people and helping them in the how. Once you know the what and the why, then the how is typically what anyone would do anyway. But that's where the coaching is, to help them with the how, and I think or not, or cut them loose with the how.
So it's to create a lot of diverse thinking is what we're trying to accomplish here by being more creative in the way we lead.
Yep.
We're also going to create an environment, and we're going to create a lot more diverse thinking, which will initially then lead to more innovative
and
products
if you look
and
at
services.
top leaders that are creative, that their companies perform, they have a very diverse team around them. The executive team has very different capabilities and different orientations, and so it's almost enforced creativity because everybody's got a different perspective.
Yeah, it's not black and white, it's more...
Yeah.
And the leader is accepting it day to day. It's not like, thinking about it once in a while. It's like every day I'm interacting with people with different perspective, and I am welcoming that.
Yeah. And I also like to think of it as giving permission from both sides. So, you might want to say, Deborah, I'm giving you permission to step up, and I can't hide any longer. I can't pretend, I'm just going to go with what Jean's saying because, Jean's always good and he gets the right answers. No, I've got to step up. So I'm giving permission, but then the executive needs to give the permission as well, that they're not going to be the one that controls it. So it's that mutual, you can't hide, and you also got to take a step back. So.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, Deborah, Jean, and Shirley are going to suggest some experiments for us to do to be more creative and to lead more creatively. Don't go away. And we are back. This is Corner Office, live from the Intercontinental Toronto Centre Hotel. And I'm Susan Radojevec, and in conversation with Deborah Pickfield, Jean-Luc Tourneau, and our special guest, Shirley Knight. We are talking how to provoke creative leadership. And we have a question, apparently. We broke away and we were going to start our experiments, but we have a question right now. Maria, what's the question?
So the question is, what would be, in your opinion, key barriers and constraints for organizations to overcome if they're to develop a cadre of creative leaders?
So, who wants to take that one? Did the question come for somebody
I
particular?
think that question was for Jean.
Oh.
Okay. I think the organization has to work on, because you can create a creative leadership environment, but unless you can train people, but unless you remove the constraint, what is making people not being creative, you're going to fail. You know, in my past experience, I remember one of my employees that, you know, I was expecting, and I was working with her, and we were training her and coaching her to become more creative. But because she had been working there for 22 years and she had seen people coming over and over, she did not believe that the organization was going in that direction. So even though we would provide more training to her, she just could not change, you know. So when it's nice to talk about creative leaderships, but when you're a creative leader, you need to understand who on your team will be able to follow, and make sure that you create conditions and you remove the constraint of what will make people not being creative.
Okay, well, we hope we answered that question. I want to now...
Can I just jump in a little bit on
Do
that
you
one?
want to? Oh, sure.
Yeah, because, I mean, I alluded to it with the compensation structure is something to, if you want to create creative leaderships, you have to create the conditions for them to work. And if you know, scientifically proven by MIT and London School of Economics, you know that a bonus structure destroys creativity. Like, you have to take, if you're going to realistically create people who are going to do this, you have to take a look at those underpinnings. And the other one that we were talking about a bit before the show, you have to take a look at how you treat failure, whatever you're calling failure. Like when people take legitimate risks and it doesn't work out the way they wanted it to, how are you going to treat that? Like, how's that going to happen? And to your point on trust. Mm-hmm. So where are the underpinnings in your culture? And that's where the leaders is, yeah, there's some training that goes with that, but just to say we're going to make a bunch of leaders is, no, you're going to have to create the conditions for a bunch of leaders, and that means being consciously competent about culture and how to use it to your advantage.
That's good that you touched on failure, because that's the second part of our show. And the first part of the show, we talked about the creative leadership and the concept and how do you need to create an environment. You need to be more open, collaborative, trust people, relinquish some of the control, but still be in charge. So this part of the show is about doing an experiment. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to ask a question, and Jean and Deborah and Deborah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sean, one of them. It's the medication. It's the medication to suppress my cough kicking in.
Too much on drugs.
Oh, yeah.
So
where do I get
Jean, Deborah, and Shirley are going to have each 2 minutes to answer the question by offering an experiment that we can do right away or in time to either develop our own creative leadership style or cultivate leaders within the organization. So feel free, for the folks online, feel free to ask a question if something is unclear about the experiment that Jean, Deborah, and Shirley are going to share. And I'm going to ask the question, and I want to make sure that Maria is ready with the stopwatch when we start.
I want her to take away a minute from Shirley and give it to me.
So here's the question.
A minute.
Now,
well, we can
I need to separate the two of you.
Yeah, we're going to have a fight.
Yes, you are.
Okay. And it's kind of piggybacking on what Shirley mentioned earlier, but we've been conditioned to be afraid of failure. And we don't even like the word failure. We think it's totally bad. But creativity requires us taking more calculated risks where where you have to do some experimentation and there is a level of an unavoidable failure. So how do we encourage risk-taking and learning from failure? And how do we measure the success of that? Who wants to go first?
Am I allowed?
Yes, you're the guest.
I'm the guest.
You could do that.
Theoretically.
We have more time to think about how to beat you up.
Okay, Maria, is the stopwatch ready?
Well, I have
You're on.
an exercise, and it would involve. I actually had two of them, but I'll just do one. And to your point on listening, but personal mastery is and self-awareness is a critical ingredient of leadership, and leaders have impact just 100,000 times more than they think they do. So how you behave is really what sets the stage for what you can or can't do. So my idea is that my experiment is that you'll spend a week, you as the leader will spend a week not talking, only listening. And the only time that you can talk is to ask a question. So while that's happening, you've got two levels of observation. You observe yourself and observe the people who are around you, your direct reports. So yourself, how's that working for you? Not being able to say anything.
Everybody would be scared.
Yeah, exactly. And while you're doing that, what are you learning? What are you hearing from people that you didn't know, that was a surprise for you or not? And then observing the people. How comfortable are they with you just listening? And then do they keep going to you for guidance, or do they actually pull back and say, okay, if you're just going to ask me questions and listen, I'm going to think of things and see how it is that they react to that. And then the last thing is to think about during that time while you're listening, how do I handle failure? How do I personally feel about failure? And so just to spend that week, that whole agonizing week of just listening and learning and practicing that, and then taking a look at what results that gave you. What did you learn from that?
What would be the success for that? How do you measure the success of that?
The measure of success is that you were able to do it.
not to talk.
And can I add to that?
Yes,
That
absolutely.
is when you're listening, is being fully present, right?
Yes,
so
good
just,
one.
Just
Good
like,
one.
don't be
What
sitting
does
there.
that mean,
It
being fully
means,
present?
and it is the hardest thing, I swear. But it's not thinking about,
grocery list?
Yeah, yes.
Exactly.
But what happened in the past, or, and I'm pretty sure I know what you're saying. It's just to really be fully engrossed in what that person's saying and not thinking about the future or the past. And it's the hardest thing we do. It is a constant struggle for me, and I don't do it very well at all. But occasionally, for a moment, it'll happen.
What do they say? We have 2 ears for what? We have 2 ears and one mouth.
Yes.
Yeah, we talk
right.
the most.
But we're usually thinking, what is it we're going to say? And that's the beauty of what Shirley's suggesting, right? It doesn't matter what we're going to say because we can't say
Not
it.
gonna say anything.
I like it. That's why I think it's a great suggestion.
That is a great
Yeah.
suggestion. I'm going to try and do that. Oh, good luck with that, Susan.
I'm not. I know.
You need to
Hey,
walk
Maria.
the talk now.
I'm going to try and not talk for a week. How are you going to manage that? Okay, who wants to go up next with their
Wanna go, John?
experiment?
You want to go?
She's on a keener this time
No,
around.
I'm really just playing the complete
I mean,
opposite.
I would suggest an experiment over a period of 3 months. And
3 months?
Yeah, it's because it's something you cannot just get results overnight. But when people come to you with projects that are long-term projects, and sometimes many CEOs get projects in front of their face, and they don't get any results. It takes 3 years to get results. By the time the project is done, teams are put together, everything and all the logistic is going, and the people start to work, and the impact is going. The thing is to do some experiment is to take those big projects and to break them into smaller pieces.
Okay.
And change, in some instance, the way of measuring how projects are being successful, by looking at our projects on time, on budget, but much more understanding the business impact and getting the people engaged in the rolling out of the project. And making sure that you're not moving beyond the first 3 months if you are not going where you want to go. This is how you can experiment, learn quick, fail quick, and if it doesn't work, you don't move beyond. I mean, too many times I've been in companies where people work on a 3-year project. The project does not make any sense, the assumptions are not good, but you know what, we're on time, we're on budget, and we're doing it. So people don't care if it's going to work at the end, but they are on time, on budget. So you need to move on shorter time frame with different objectives, not on time, on budget, but what will be the impact on the business, and do we have the people engaged, working on the project, customers of the project that will be with us along the way.
So it's kind of like you're addressing the results as they emerge. So
I mean, you're experimenting and you're going and doing things for 3 months, but you're looking at results as you go,
as they go along,
and see is it moving in the right direction, as opposed to wait 3 years down the road and you decided to do that project because someone else did it somewhere else into another company.
And in your model, would you allow people to change things? Is that what you're suggesting?
You know, obviously, when you go from the NASA to the moon, you know, even if there are thousands of computers, every 1 mile they're changing directions. So it's like, why, you know, despite of all those brains working behind that, they have to change directions every 1 mile, and there's 250,000 miles.
Yeah.
So how in the world can you expect to go on a $5, $25 million projects? I mean, I work with a big financial institution. They were into a 5-year projects, and one of the key person in the project said, you know, we had all those big ideas up front. We are 3 years into it. We have spent 25 million, but we don't know where we're going. Can you help us to define where we're going at the end? So, you know, it's like it's a big project. It's not broken down in small pieces. Does not allow you to track if you're moving in the right direction, but you're just working on a big thing.
Okay, that's 2 minutes.
Good.
Wow. Okay. Any comments? Oh, you want to do? Okay, no comments. Deborah Peters.
Yes, okay, sorry. Do we comments on Jean's
No, I'm just, if there is any. If not, you go right ahead and give us your experience.
No, but I liked your example. That was a really great example.
Yeah, we have a week and 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
So mine's very different. I'm actually cribbing from some really great...
Cribbing?
Cribbing, meaning I'm cheating. I'm taking it from other people, from what they've... so I was in an event last week, Association of International Career Professionals, and a gentleman spoke from ING Bank, and he had a great way of how they're very innovative.
Yeah,
they're
excellent.
amazing. So I have an example from them. I have an example from the woman who spoke from the Conference Board of Canada. They have a new study out which is really pretty amazing. But I'll tell you what happens at ThinkSpot. Something so simple, which is the dismissive hat. It's just letting this hat will go flying around the room because people are realizing as soon as they shut somebody down, they've lost an idea. Yeah. So that would be my one little suggestion. It's something simple, but it works. And it can be, you know, it's an old ski hat I had, but it just flies around the room. But what ING does is they have a penguin. They give a penguin award for people who actually take the risk. So if you think of the March of the Penguins movie, where there was one penguin who had to, they're all waiting to go in the water, and there was one that will go. And make sure it's, you know, find out whether they're going to be eaten by a seal. So they give a penguin award to the person who will actually take the risk and go in, because they really appreciate employees taking that, willing to be taking the risk. But what I loved was the Conference Board of Canada's study on immigrants and how they are the best at being innovative and creative because they've gotten up and moved from a country. So when you think about it, well, does that mean for people who actually changed a number of jobs, that maybe they're more open to risk and willing to take chances? Well, and I think there is a lot of merit to that. So immigration, people who've immigrated, people who've actually been saying, you know, I'm not spending 20, another, I appreciate people who've been there 20 years, but maybe the ones who've been there 3 or 4, and then they're kind of going, okay, I'm ready to try it again and have to and kind of find my way through another organization. So my suggestions are, one, the dismissive hat. It's the not letting people, you know, having that penguin award I thought was brilliant by ING. I wouldn't use the word failure. I would actually say if somebody uses it, they have to contribute $5, and every time you get enough, you buy a lunch for the team. But failure wouldn't be in my lexicon. And I would encourage the fact that it's the little small things that can make a difference. So.
Okay.
I mean, if you work on a smaller project and it does not work and you stop after 3 months, it's not a failure, it's a learning.
Yes.
So why would you go if it's
Exactly.
not creating the, you know, the impact of what you thought originally?
Yeah.
The failure is when you know, like we were talking earlier, is when you keep going and you are going nowhere.
Yeah.
And you keep going and you go nowhere.
Yeah.
So that's failure, because
Yeah.
at the end you end up, you know, having no impact and having spent 3 years and lots of money sometimes to get to nothing.
Right.
You know, I saw a great tweet the other day on Twitter. It said, the opposite of success isn't failure, it's complacency.
Absolutely. It's
I
a
thought
great
that was
quote.
a fantastic
Yeah.
tweet.
Yeah.
It was
And I
good.
worry about Canadians. Sorry, I actually worry that we are complacent.
we had a little.
Do
you
we
know
have
what?
time? Do we have time for the Canada commercial?
Do we have time? Do we have
I've
time
got a
for-
2-minute Canada commercial.
You can't have 2 minutes.
Okay, 1 minute
40
Canada commercial.
No, 40
Oh, 40
seconds.
seconds. Canada is poised to be the next world superpower. And I would just hope that the leaders listening would seize that and say, wow, we could really do something here. 10th largest economy in the world, 3rd largest supply of oil next to Saudi and Venezuela. Excellent schools. We've got the chemical industry is being repatriated. It's coming back. World-renowned expertise in mining, and we have a very stable and good central bank. So there is, and people love Canadian leaders globally. Canadian leaders, you might not know that, but they do. And because we work so well, we don't enforce a culture. We work with people. That's the Canadian way. So this is our moment.
We're diverse.
And don't hold ourselves down because we're afraid of failure. Like I just don't. This is our moment. We can really jump out, and the world's waiting for us to do it, and we're the best people to do it.
I don't think it's that we're afraid of failing. We're just I don't know what it is. We just don't want to be the first to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's. I really don't think it's about failing. I think that we just
Because
don't
there's a
want
lot
to
of
be the first.
entrepreneurs coming out of. I mean,
Exactly.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of places that'll tell you the entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well.
It's almost
So
as
larger
though
companies, maybe.
we don't want to be in people's faces. It's like, you know, we're the nice people. We don't want to be like we're grabbing the spotlight. I think it's time we grab the spotlight.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
you know,
you're right. Again, it's about having the conditions in place to, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have access to money, you may have the best ideas in the world, but if you don't have access to the market or the through the money to execute, then you're bound to fail. So there's a lot more money, you know, on the south side of the border than there is in Canada. So that's why in many instances
For sure.
ideas
Yeah,
are
for
easy
sure.
to come on the other side.
yeah.
So that's, you know, and I agree with you that Canada has all the, you know, the right conditions and the right environment. It's just
it's a
that
moment in time.
we
It's a
have to
moment in time.
focus on the positive and not
Yeah.
look as much as cost reductions, but cost contractions, but grow the economy.
Yeah.
And that's the key
Grow.
thing.
Well, we have to wrap it up, folks, because we've gone a little bit long, but that
geez.
means it was a good conversation. So what I'm taking away from this is that I have to stop talking for a week and listen.
Which will be good for your cold.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Now's a good
That's
time
good
for me to do
timing.
that.
It's
Exactly.
good timing.
Diversity in the workplace is good. Creating diverse thinking is
thinking
great.
is really important.
We're not going to use failure. We're going to use
False starts.
false start.
First try.
First
Initial
tries.
effort.
Experiment.
Initial experiment.
Experiments.
Yep.
We got to trust. Provide parameters. What else? I think that kind of encapsulates everything.
We need to catapult Canada into world leadership.
And we got to get up there and say, take the limelight as
Exactly.
Canada.
And you got to
Okay.
recognize the people who take the risk, right?
That's
Yes,
right.
You got to
that's good.
celebrate
Yeah,
them. You
excellent.
really, for somebody to put themselves out there, and even if it's disagreeing with you, then they need to be acknowledged for
That's what you
risking.
need to promote, people to disagree, because
Yeah.
if you have a bunch
right.
of executives around the table and all they do is smile and nod, you know.
Yeah.
And leaders need to role model that.
Yes.
Their
True.
acceptance of controversy and
Yeah.
their enjoyment of diversity.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to acknowledge the great people around this table today. So thank you, Shirley Knight, Deborah
Thank you for
Pigfield,
having me.
and Jean Le Tourneau for being in Corner Office
Thank
today,
you. You're welcome.
for sharing your wisdom. It's been great. Corner Office Complexity Series, How to Provoke Creative Leadership, is locked in. If you would like to watch this episode again, it is being recorded and will be available for viewing next week on our webpage, Corner Office Episodes. Our website is theperegrineagency.ca. If you have thoughts on today's show, go to our website and click on the agency blog and post your comments. Find us on Twitter. Our hashtag is COLive, or follow me at Susan Radojevic. Bookmark our agency blog and be the first to hear about our Complexity Series April show. If your organization has a business method, tool, or technology our community should know about, go to our website and click on Contact Us. That's, I think, a wrap. Thank you, Maria, and a big shout out to our sponsors and partners coming up on your screen. Check them out, folks. And finally, thank you for participating and watching today. See you next time. For Corner Office, I'm Susan Radojevic, logging out.